Welcome to the Meditation Mama podcast. I'm your host, Lyndsey, mama to 3 highly sensitive children, and founder of the Meditation Mama Company. On this show, we talk about motherhood, parenting, spirituality, personal growth, and shifting old paradigms that are ready to go so that you can live your most authentic, soul-aligned life. I also release special guided meditations that will help you open your heart, clear out any blocks, and soothe your nervous system. Hello, beautiful mama. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited to share this episode with you. I was just listening back to it, and there are just so many nuggets of wisdom in here for us as mothers and just as people in general. I interview my friend Maggie Byrne Taylor, and Maggie is a spiritual business owner and also a mama to 3 teenagers. So she is just a wealth of knowledge. She is a healer who really walks the walk, if that makes sense. Like, she is very much what you see is what you get. And I think you'll feel in her energy as she's speaking just how knowledgeable and how grounded and, like I said, how wise she is. And she's probably going to laugh when she listens to this opening because she'll be like, geez, Lyndsey, you're giving me so much credit. But that's also the beauty of Maggie. She's very, very humble. And I just love that about her. So in this episode, we talk a lot about healing after tragedy. In the beginning, we discuss how Maggie's story really unfolded. She was working in marketing, living in New York, kind of had this fast-paced life, and she lost her younger brother. And so we talk about how that affected her and how that then led her to yoga and later energy healing and then training in it and teaching it. We talk about everyday mindfulness for mamas. Maggie has so many beautiful little tips and tricks here that I personally too was taking note of. And I just love her perspective on everyday mindfulness. So we discuss that. We also dive into the parallels of parenting teens and littles. And this was really fascinating for me to hear her perspective. We talk about how you move through your triggers as a parent and also balancing how much can you give to each child and noticing when you're projecting your own experiences and your own wounding onto them. We dive into inner child healing. What is this? It's become very popular. How do you actually do it? So we'll discuss that. And we also talk about how each family member's energy affects the others. This is just a very, I would say, like well-rounded episode on multiple topics. And so I had to leave it as one big chunk. I normally try to do shorter episodes, but this just felt like it needed to be all in one place. So I left it as one long episode. You might have to listen in pieces, but you're not going to want to miss any part of this. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Maggie Byrne Taylor.
I was working in marketing, and I had actually recently taken a break to be a stay-at-home mom. I had my kids at the time were ages 5, 3, and 6 months. And I had a sudden loss. My brother passed away suddenly. And that passing led me to, of course, experience horrific grief. And I had some PTSD from it, that kind of side by side, simultaneously, a spiritual awakening. So I was raised very, very Irish Catholic school through kindergarten, through college. And so I was raised with a very in-depth religious background. So when Pat passed away, it was my natural response to kind of turn towards religion. And I love all religions. I turned back towards the church, and although I did receive some solace, I felt this calling to go deeper into the intuitions that I was receiving, the spiritual, without lack of a better word, downloads that I was receiving. So I began meditating, again, alongside complex PTSD and grief. And with the meditation, I remember that I always had loved yoga, so I started dabbling back in yoga classes, and it surprised me how much healing I began to receive from the movement and from the meditations. So then I wanted more and to go deeper. So I took a energy healing class and I started going to energy healers, and everything began opening up and I began healing myself. And through that healing, I just wanted more and wanted more. So I started taking additional teacher trainings, really in essence to heal and to receive that knowledge myself. And it turns out that my dharma is to share that which I learned to heal myself. So I began and it kind of naturally unfolded. I decided to share a yoga class with the spiritual knowledge that I knew, and then it just kind of opened up from there and started incorporating energy healing into my classes and sharing meditation. And then one thing kind of led to another, the way it does when you're on the spiritual journeys. You notice that as you kind of move your attention and awareness towards something, doors began opening. So here I am, 12, actually probably 12 and a half years later. Of course, my kids are older now, and I have a studio downtown Fairfield.
It's so beautiful and so resonant because it is true. It's like once you start to get a taste of how good you can feel, you're like, I never want to go back. And I can't even imagine the healing that came from that in terms of your loss as well, and just developing your own connection spiritually outside of the church. I mean, how incredible to have that. But that's really, it's interesting how so many of us that are called to whatever it may be, meditation, mindfulness, energy healing, some sort of spirituality, it often does stem from a tragedy, which you touched on. Like for me, it was postpartum anxiety, not once, but twice, and probably some depression in there as well. And it's like, okay, what can I do holistically to heal this without going to medication and maybe therapy is not working? Like, what else can I do? So I love that that's how you were led there as well, like many of us. I was
Wow.
thinking about our interview and I was thinking, you are a very grounded spiritual person, and that can be far and few between, especially for someone who has kind of been in this realm for so many years as an energy healer and a yoga teacher. So I'm just wondering, kind of like, what can you give the listeners in terms of grounded guidance on where to begin with maybe cultivating that mindfulness connection, or some of the little tips and tricks you have around energy healing for those that aren't trained in Reiki or any other form, just things that they can do throughout their day to get that higher vibration, that like positivity going, especially the mamas.
So when I first kind of like stuck my stake in the ground and was like, oh my gosh, this is healing me. I understand that everything is energy. My first initial thought was, I need to heal this trauma, right? This loss, this grief. I need to heal this. And what I noticed pretty quickly was that, yes, it was a massive loss and really life changing, life defining. But as you get into the realms of energy and energy healing, we realize that there are many levels and layers to the self. And what I didn't really understand at the time, which I do now, was that there was so much kind of behind it, right? The traumas that we experience throughout just simply being alive, our own family history and our own family, so, or school or whatever experiences that we have. So, I kind of jumped in. I'm going to heal this. But what I noticed was, again, with those doors opening, was, oh, there's a lot behind here to heal. So, with that in mind, one of the things that I try to share with anyone who's a beginner or just getting more involved in mindfulness or meditation is giving yourself grace, giving yourself patience. That we we are in a society, like you said, medication, and I am for medication. I've taken, my children have. I'm in no way anti-medication. However, in our society, there is a belief system of quick fix, get the thing, get it done, fix this, check the box, move to the next thing. When it comes to self healing and spirituality and mindfulness, they it can take time, and it requires an immense amount of patience. It's like each little thing that you do, you're planting seeds, and you need to allow time for those seeds to grow. We don't like, and I think in society, often there's this idea of like plant the seed and it's done. So, what I would say is the first thing is give yourself grace, give yourself patience, um, be gentle with yourself. One of the things I teach people right away is like, no matter where we are in our, we're always doing the best that we can. And we're not necessarily conditioned to think that way. We're often very conditioned to be very hard on ourselves. So, really allowing yourself to connect to your heart and know that anything that's happened that you've done in the past, that you were doing the best that you can. So, as far as the tips and tricks and incorporating this type of work into your everyday life is, how can you incorporate any of the elements that first work for you and make it in a way that's joyful and playful, as opposed to this is just another item on the list of things that I have to do to be good, right? So, whether it's taking deep breaths when you get into the car, making little agreement. That's how I look at it for myself, is I make little agreements with myself. Like, okay, I'm really busy. I'm running around with the kids. Every time I get into the car, I'm going to sit and take 10 deep breaths before I drive anywhere to connect myself, to ground myself. Or I'm going to bless my coffee and my water every morning. It's these little things that you can do to trickle throughout the day that bring the peace through you and to you, that help you kind of thread that grace and patience throughout these busy days that we have. And then, of course, scheduling time for yourself, scheduling time for a yoga class, or scheduling time for your journaling. But looking into or focusing towards things that bring you joy, allow you to share that. Do you know what I mean by that? So, like, again, back to the spirituality, I think that there can be a idea of I have to do it, or it has to be this way. And that's not true. It has to be in a way that feels like it resonates with your heart, that feels in some way. The healing work is not always joyful, of course, but there has to be a connection to it that feels like it's right for you, as opposed to, well, this teacher said I should do this thing, this teacher said I should do that. It's okay to use that guidance, but always checking back in with yourself. And does this feel right? Do I align with this? Is this true to who I am and what I need?
That is such incredible guidance. And I'm just thinking back to when I started meditating, I was very much that person where it was like, okay, I'm committing to this, which is fantastic. But it was like, if I didn't do I was committing, usually 45 minutes a day. And if I didn't do that, I would just feel like, oh, I'm failing. I mean, I had such a good streak going and now it's ruined. And it's like, no, all is not lost. It's actually better, I've realized, especially as you were saying, as a mom, to take those little moments throughout the day. It really centers you and grounds you and brings you back to yourself and your patience as a mom and your calm and all the things. And I love also, I tell people often, because almost every time I say I'm a meditation teacher, somebody in the group will say, oh, I should meditate, but I don't. And I tell them, you can make it whatever you want. You can meditate while you're walking. I meditate all the time when I'm in the car. You can do all these active meditations. You can, like you said, take 10 deep breaths when you're in your car, and that can be your mindfulness moment. It doesn't have to be this whole big thing, although I still really, really love and crave my hour-long midday meditation when the kids do quiet time. But I think that is just such important advice, and actually a great reminder for me as a mom of young kids, something to instill in them as well. And something else that you mentioned really resonated is just doing your best. And as you were saying that, I was just hearing, and your best is going to change every day. And that's okay. And don't beat yourself up for it because, like you said, we're all just doing the best we can. And one day you might be at a 10, and one day you might be at a 2, and it's all good. I know I always talk about how I'm a recovering perfectionist. I'm the firstborn child, and kind of a lot gets put on you when you're the firstborn, whether intentionally or unintentionally by the parents. And it's something I'm now working on with my firstborn because I'm seeing those perfectionist tendencies. And we've been saying that kind of motto, like you just have to do your best. And if that means that you get a 1 out of 10 on your spelling test, that's okay. As long as you did your best, I don't care. I just want you to be your best self. So that all just resonates so much, and I think that's so helpful.
And something else that you said in that, which comes back to, does it resonate for me when it comes to these practices, is starting where you are. Like, we have such high expectations in this world of being someone, of completing something, of meeting internal or external obligations. And the truth is, we're all on our own journeys with our own backgrounds and our own experiences. So where I begin and where somebody else begins can be two very, very different things. And it goes for the kids too, right? So I said 10 deep breaths in the car. And, as I'm saying that, I'm hearing, well, maybe it's one, or maybe it's three for some people. 10 might be a lot. Or like, you have your hour-long meditation, and that's amazing. Like, I love my meditations, and I could probably live in a meditative state as opposed to the real
Same.
world very
Yeah.
easily. But, that's not true for everybody. It took you a while to get there, right? So, you start off with a 1 minute meditation, a 2 minute, a three, whatever it might be that that's that you're able to do, right? So that starting where you are is really important, and that self-acceptance that comes along with it, can be hugely, really life changing. Like, this is where I am, and that's okay, right? We're always, especially like with the kids, like the kids in school, they're really pushed often to meet achievements, of course, right? But not everybody learns the same way, and not everyone has the same distress tolerance or emotional management skills. So even when it comes to the kids, like for each of my kids, it's like, okay, well, where are they? What do they need? Like, we're not all the same. Everybody has their own temperaments and experiences and gifts and things that they're working on. So where do we need to begin? And often that beginning is acceptance. It's self-acceptance and acceptance of others, or others that you're guiding, whether it's your children, your clients, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, you have such a beautiful perspective. I'm just soaking this all in right now. I'm just thinking how lucky your kids are to have you. How old are they now?
Well, I
And
think
let's
they're
let's
so
dive into let's dive into seasoned motherhood, because sometimes I'm like, am I a seasoned mom? I'm 7 years in, and then I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm not at all. And
is anyone, like, they're always your kids. I look at my parents and my relationship with them, and I'm 49 and I'm still their kid in some ways. So again, it's all just about where you're at, right? So to answer your question, I have three kids. Andrew is now 17, almost 18. Grace is 16 and Kat's about to turn 13 on 11/11/11. How cool is that?
Wow, what a special birthday. What a special
All three of
girl.
my kids, I don't usually talk about this that much, but Andrew is the winter solstice,
Hmm.
and Grace is the autumn equinox, and then Kat's 11, 11.
That
So they
is
have really neat
wild.
birthdays. But,
Wow. Oh,
yeah.
so I guess I want to dive into parenting older children because my perspective is on, that of elementary age and younger. My oldest is in first grade. So we're really just still beginning elementary. So I want to understand kind of I guess your tips, your tricks, your guidance on parenting teens in this modern age because the thought of my kids becoming even middle schoolers, it terrifies me right now. So
Um,
how are you doing that? How are you
let me
incorporating mindfulness and all the things?
let me tell you something. When my kids began high school, I was so beyond grateful that I had these practices because for me, there was a lot of, or and continues to be testing and resilience, patience, like you said, terrifying, fear, they're off on their own. And, okay, you're going to have to cut this part out. I forget what your question
It's
was.
okay. I just asked you I kind of asked you a bunch of questions in one. Tips, tricks, guidance, just
Tips for
how
teenagers.
sort of how you're, I guess the real question would be, how are you parenting differently than say the masses? Because I know that you are.
Okay, so the way that I've reframed and looking at teenagers is you said your oldest is in first grade.
Mhm.
So when you have kids and they're born, it's like month one is one way, month two is another way, and you just start to get your hands around, okay, this is what it's like to have a 3 month old, and then they're walking, and then this. So it's very similar as they continue to grow, middle school, high school. It's just always change, always evolving. So that's one thing that I've had to really allow is kind of like a letting go and okay, I got this and I know how this works because the minute I've thought that, things change. My children, similar to myself, are very sensitive. They all have really strong empathic abilities and very strong emotions, very different personalities. Um, so I don't know how others parent. You're saying how do you do it differently from the masses? What I try to do is kind of back to what we were saying before is just looking at who is this person because as they become teens, there's a natural ability to pull away and to establish their own identity outside of mom and outside of dad and outside of brothers and sisters. There's a natural tendency to, well, this is who I am and this is the way that I want to do it. So from my perspective from parenting is looking at, okay, who are they? What do they need at this time? And how can I help to guide them in that way? At the same time, when we talk about healing, the better I am to myself and the more healed I am, the better parent I am. So I've had to really, through the last 4 to 5 years, when those things come up with the teens that push me, trigger me, that really bring me massive amounts of fear, I've had to step back and look at my own inner teenager, my own places where I've had to heal myself. And to be honest with you, I'm continuing to do that because I'm right in the thick of it. Freshman in college, junior in high school, eighth grade. There's a lot happening there. So that's really been the biggest thing is who am I in all of this and how can I be more true to myself and look at where my old samskara or my old trauma is kind of projecting outwards And if I'm kind of getting caught up in it, I'm going to literally try to pull myself out and go my own healing, whether it's outside or self healing. So really, I come back to myself a lot as opposed to you should be different and you should be this way. It's okay, who am I in this and what do I need to
That makes so much sense because my husband and I were just talking about this. He and my son is like a little version of him in a lot of ways. And he even looks so much like my husband as a child. And they definitely have this like mirroring situation going on where we've realized that my son will do things to trigger my husband. Not, I don't think my son intentionally knows this, it's all subconscious, but he's trying to figure out how's dad going to handle this because dad is my mirror. And it's also triggering my husband because his little inner child is feeling all the things and it's bringing him back. And I sort of have that with our middle, who again looks just like me. And so it's really interesting to hear you say that because this has been very much in my sphere of awareness lately. And everything you're saying, I'm like, wow. So I guess what I'm dealing with is pretty much what we're going to be dealing with as teenagers because it's all kind of it's the same, but just different
same as
levels.
different ages,
Yeah.
right? Just they're as babies growing and then toddler. It just continues. It's just some of the situations become different. And you're one of the things that's really challenging for me is, when my kids were your age, like I loved packing everybody in the car. I'm in control. This is where we're going. We're going to the pumpkin patch. This is what we're doing. And then you have teenagers and they're off and they want to do their thing. And it's like you have to kind of like step back and where do I push? Where do I let go? But again, just like what you're saying, those big things that come up that start to bring me that massive inner turmoil or turmoil in my family unit, it's like, okay, here's the mirror, right? What do I need to look at in myself that's causing me to feel these strong emotions or having these big experiences?
Yeah.
And then the kids, like when they're, especially as teenagers, when they get to that age, like life can be traumatic. Like they each have their own traumas, their own experiences. And as a mom, back to we're doing the best that we can, this journey, my kids, when they were quite little, I went through a huge loss, right? So they have mom one day, certain way, next day, totally different and going through grief and my own transformation process. So, they have their own experiences with that, but then their own experiences with school and with friends and other things that occur in life. So that's another part of it is get back to who are they? What are their needs and where, we're all healing as we're living, right? So what's coming up for them and how can they support them best as opposed to kind of impeding subconsciously my agenda on how things should be as opposed to how things really are.
Yeah. And it's interesting because we have very similar age gaps, even with
Mm.
3 kids. I know one thing that I struggle with, and I'm curious what your take on this is. I feel like I can give so much to one,
Mm.
and then another one gets a good amount of me, and then a third one always gets left out. It's like I'm always so focused on what's the child who needs me the most, what do they need, and how can I best support them, and that's taking up a lot of me. And then the second one, so I struggle with that with 3 is just balancing how much of myself I can give. And I don't know if part of that is just being okay with that one one child or maybe 2 children are not going to get as much as the other and it's all going to come around again. But do you struggle with that still, or is that something that you experience as a mom of 3? Because I really think it's hard because with 2, it's like you can pair off. With 3, there's always one.
So have I struggled with that? Yes and no, because each kid's personality is so different, right? Each of their experiences are so different. So my oldest is born and they have, he had just the two of us. And he had all of our attention, all of our focus, not for very long because they're under 2 years apart. And then my second's born, and she gets to look up to a one there, to her older brother there, and my husband and I. And then the third is born, and she gets to see two kids there and us. So the family dynamic shifts as each kid is born, and they're born into different, really different families energetically. So if you want to back up spiritually, it's my belief that from the other side, when we're creating our lives, that we choose our parents and we choose, there's, karmic agreements in who our siblings are. So I like to think about that. And okay, they're choosing us for their life lessons, for who they are, for how they're going to help heal this planet that we're on. So if we kind of back out and look at it from the children or the spiritual perspective, they're each born into a different dynamic. Um, Now, as far as who needs the most, yes, I've struggled with that. When one kid, I've had my kids have, different needs and different um, disorders, as you would say. I don't love that word because I actually think it's all their gifts. But between ADHD, anxiety, and whatever else that we have had, certain kids need more from my husband and I. And actually, I would be doing a disservice to the others if I didn't focus on the one who really needs it. So I try to keep an open communication to the others, like, listen, this one's having a hard time. Like, again, my kids are older than yours, so there's a different maybe communication level. But by the time they're teenagers, this one's having a hard time. I know they're spending a lot of time. Maybe we can go get ice cream together. I'll just try to keep the communication open, so that there is a window for one of them to say, well, I feel like you're giving him a lot of time. Like, what about me? Because that's really where the layers and the levels, I think, of kind of like stuffing our emotions deep down inside where we hold it all in. As a parent, I just like to have it open so that I'll say, like, hey, how are you? I know that this is hard. This must be hard when I'm always focusing on, are you okay? And either it's like, no, I'm not okay. Let's talk about it, or yeah, sure, whatever. But at least the door is open, because as a mom and as a dad, you have to continuously evaluate, where is my attention needed the most. So it's actually a really good thing that you do it. And if you want to back up the belief systems within our society are, this is generalized, but you're not doing enough and you're not good enough, right? So that's going to be the immediate thought, like, oh, I'm failing someone. But from an loving awareness perspective, from how much time you have and from doing your best, if you're focusing on the one that needs it the most and you're still loving the others, you're actually doing the best for your family. So that's a long answer.
No, it's a beautiful reframe. It's something that I'm going to personally be coming back to. And as you were talking, I was thinking, maybe it's actually a little bit of my own issue that I'm bringing into the family with that, because of being the oldest and being so self-sufficient. It was always like, she's fine, like she's good.
Right.
And so maybe that's just me putting my own fears into the situation more than anything as well. So yeah, I love that reframe of the
Well, I do
whole.
that a lot. Put my own fear. That's what I'm talking about, is
Yeah.
kind of like when I feel myself or I hear, that's one of the benefits of the practices is having the awareness of where your thoughts go and where you're judging yourself or where you're really hard on yourself. So whether I'm projecting or it's what's really happening, it's like if there's internal struggle there, okay, well, let's rewind and come back to myself. Listen, I do a ton of inner child work on myself continuously, continuously.
For anyone who's listening who's like, what is all this inner child talk? What would you tell them where would you tell them to begin? And what are some things that you've done that have been helpful with inner child healing?
Well, that is a really good question. So the concept of inner child is that everything will go back to everything is energy, and we're born as pure, authentic, pure spiritual light. We're spiritually pure beings, and upon our existence here, we develop personality and levels and layers of the self that are really culturally created. Little things like holding the baby, don't cry, don't cry, right? As opposed to let it flow. And I said don't cry. So again, there's no judgment in anything. And even if I hear a baby cry, I still feel that internal mother. You know, some of it's natural, but some of it's also culturally created, sitting in the chairs for long periods of time, focusing when some of us are more naturally attuned to working outside in nature. But we create these levels and layers around who our authentic being is. When we come to the inner child, that inner child is an inner part of ourselves that either hasn't been recognized or processed, or that had to shut down to make whatever the situation that was having, work for themselves at the time. So inner child work, um, there's plenty of inner child, like free meditations for people. That's something they're interested in through apps like Insight Timer. But inner child work, the way that I do it is through energy healing, where we work with the highest realms of light, and through guided healing, go back to those particular ages and times and really re-experience as you're the inner authority now, and incorporating that part of ourselves through loving awareness, through acceptance. It's really bringing that part of your soul that might be um, holding on or shut down, and we bring that part of ourselves back and love that part of ourselves. So, as opposed to this culturally created self, we're living for more of our authentic inner self.
Yeah. Yeah. I too have done a lot of inner child work, and for me, I usually start in meditation and just imagine myself at that age, and I'll just give her the biggest hug and just say, you're so incredible and you're so loved, and just all the things that you would want to hear. And I'm usually crying by the end of the meditation. And I've also written letters to myself. And that has been really healing, because for me, writing is just something that I've always really connected with, and journaling. It's a way that I've moved energy before I knew what, energy healing and energy work was.
Little things, like I say little things, but those are big things, because I think we're again conditioned to just deal with it and move on, deal with it, move on, deal with it, move on, and it can be really, really hard to be like, okay, well, when I was 5, this happened. I'm going to look at that. And when you take the time to do it, though, it allows that part of yourself to be present and to receive, like you were saying, giving the biggest hug, receive the love, and really the validation. That's one of the biggest parts of it, is the validation that what happened wasn't okay, and that you can still love yourself through all of those really difficult, challenging feelings. I love that meditation, journaling, letters, and then if there's even more you can do, like if there's a certain age that you're working on, you can do things in the outside world to take, like if I was working on my 5-year-old, I might go get myself ice cream and get it for her, or go, what did I love to do then? I really loved animals and I didn't really have a chance to explore that. That's not me personally. We had like tons of animals growing up. But if that is resonates for someone, um, spending more time with animals or pets. I will kind of expand on this since we're talking about the kids. When my kids have big challenges at certain ages, that is a huge message from the universe, source, divine, however you look at it, for me to look at that age for myself. So if one of my kids is going through something, and I'm really having that emotion, because we always want our kids to feel good, right? We want them to always be in a state of flow and ease. So when I feel that struggle with what's going on, and I'm going to be like, okay, time for me to do some inner child work on this age. For me personally, I wouldn't say like, oh, this is true for everybody. It might be, but
I think it's good to have that awareness, though.
a big green light for me. Like, oh, look at what's happening. You need to heal that part of yourself.
Yeah, especially if you are feeling super triggered. Anytime you're triggered by anyone, that's something to look deeper at within yourself. I also feel like that's one of the most beautiful things about having children, especially young children. Some days I'm like, oh, I don't feel like getting on the ground and, playing makeup shop or whatever my little girls are doing lately. They love to do like hair salon and pretend to do my makeup. But then I do it and I'm like, this feels so good. I feel like playing is so healing, and just looking at the world through their eyes and having that sacred reverence again for something that you would normally overlook, like the way that a flower looks with a little bee on top, or the shape of the clouds in the sky. And it is so healing. And it just also just makes you, it raises your vibration overall. It just makes you feel really, really good. So play has actually been something I've really been focusing on, I would say this year more than ever. And like, what do I want to do as an adult to play? Do I want to get a scooter for myself? I don't know. Do I want to go on the trampoline, even if my kids don't want to go with me? Just the little things that you can do to kind of incorporate that for yourself, especially as your kids get older.
I love that.
Yeah.
I think that too is a testament to some of the healing work that you've done for yourself, because you immediately said, oh, I feel like, oh, I don't want to do this, right? It can be hard to play. It can be hard to put your phone down or your business or whatever, and okay, let's get into that imaginary world. So I think, like, just in talking with you, just that noticing, like, oh, I don't want to do this, but then you do it and it feels good. So I think that's one of the benefits of healing and meditation, is just noticing, oh, oh, look where I'm going with this. Like, we always have a choice, right? But we only have the awareness of the choice when we recognize, right? We do so much subconsciously throughout the day, but you're recognizing, oh, I'm resisting here. And you have a choice. You could go, work on your business, work on your phone, or just take a minute and go lay on the floor. And when you're choosing to do that, then you're receiving, oh, this actually is sacred. Oh, I am present, right? So that's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Thank you. I agree. I do think that's one of the biggest benefits of meditating and mindfulness work. And for me, like I said, journaling has been huge for that, is just having that awareness with everything, whether it's your trigger or your pain points or whatever it may be. It really just, I feel like that's almost the epitome of becoming a more conscious being, is awareness. It all comes back to that. And
Absolutely.
yeah. I want to ask you, there's a question that I've realized is sort of I guess, the question I'm asking everyone on the podcast. So I guess my signature question. I talk often about motherhood as this initiation and also this transformation. And so I want to ask you, what has motherhood initiated you into, knowing that there are many things and many transformations, but is there anything that sticks out in particular?
That's a really interesting question. I haven't thought about it like that. So what is an initiation? Almost like a rite of passage, right? If we're being initiated, we kind of have to go through some really challenging things to arrive almost at like a threshold, right? So I guess I'm still in the initiation phase when it comes to motherhood because I'm still growing and I'm still learning. But some of those things that I've learned is really, probably everything that we've been talking about, and that is um, two things actually. It's coming back to myself and self healing, but also when you have children, there's such a motivation to be the best version of myself for them. So if I go back to, okay, the greatest tragedy that I've had in my life so far, my children were really my motivation. There was a moment that I had when this all happened, and I was in the depths of grief, and I noticed in a split second I can either go down or up with this. I can choose to just mask or drink or whatever, or I can lean into these things that are helping me heal. And a lot of the motivation for that was my children and who am I to them. Also, the understanding, I'm going to sidebar this, of karma. And okay, I can choose here to rise up or to fall through this. But when it comes to karma, our children are a part of that. So, this motivation that I felt of, I'm going to be true to myself, be this best version of who I am for myself, of course, but for them, because the better that I am, that's a guidepost for them to see. Well, what can I do? Well, who am I really? Who am I authentically? Because I before I worked in this realm, I worked in advertising and marketing forever. My husband and I lived in New York City. We were running around with our friends and restaurants, and so when I kind of moved into this, it took a lot of courage and internal validation over and over again. And this is what's true for me. And my children were really probably the biggest motivation. So I'm not sure if I'm necessarily answering your question because I feel like I'm still within the initiation, but a part of the initiation is this massive amount of of love that I have for them. And in that love for them, how can I be the best? Because if you think about even your own, for me, again, this is personal, but when I think about my own parents, when I think about them, the better they are, the better I feel, right? The better they are, the better I feel. So that intuitive notion of my children are the same, the better I am, the better they feel and the better they can grow into their authentic selves as opposed to the outside world. And it says they should be, because we're unlimited beings. We're spiritual beings with all the potential in the world. It's just belief systems that are kind of help maybe hinder or can help, but hinder or help us get to that point of feeling really true to yourself, comfortable in who you are.
Yeah, and your children watching you be your most authentic self and seeing you really create this own unique path that maybe no one else around you is doing. That is so inspiring. And whether they realize it or not, I'm sure they will as they get older. They're going to be like, wow, mom did that. So then I can go do this. So you're
Right,
really
exactly.
creating
Whatever
this,
them,
yeah,
right,
yeah.
right, right. I will tell you, I'm very lucky in that my youngest right now, we do a yoga and meditation class with some of her friends here. So they come over a couple of days after school. We're walking distance from the school. So that's just such a gift that she's in the kind of a sweet spot age of absorbing, when they get a little bit older and there's more of the resistance, the practices or me, saying, oh, use your Reiki or, oh, meditate. Sometimes there's that, well, that doesn't work. And I have to let go and let them do it their way. But I know with this work, a lot of it is just planting the seeds. And like you said, just showing them mom did this, so I could do this. It's just seeing like, I won't say, oh, you have to meditate because it works for me. Well, meditation works for me, right? Or this energy work works for me. And they do pick up on some of it. I see it. I see it sometimes come through.
Yeah,
But yeah,
they're always watching, and I feel
yeah.
like sometimes your energy certainly speaks louder than your words, but also
Mm,
just seeing you doing something versus you telling them they should do it.
right.
Like I'm thinking about my husband in particular too, who does not meditate, and for so long it was driving me nuts. I'm like, I'm a meditation teacher and I can't get my husband to meditate. Like, come on. But I realized that I had to let that go and just let him do his own thing, and that his version of meditation is actually just working in the yard in
Right.
silence. And that's kind of his moving meditation.
Yeah.
So, and he really
We're
started doing
all
more and more of
different,
that. Yeah.
right? Like my husband, I wouldn't, he's not a meditator, but he fly fishes and he likes to tie flies and he does other creative work and that's his way. And I think from the spouse's perspective too, the more peaceful and confident we are in ourselves and they just respect it and do, their own thing alongside. But I haven't been successful in getting my husband to meditate or do yoga. He likes to receive Reiki, that's for sure. I wouldn't say that he's sharing. He's
Yeah.
sharing.
Yeah. My husband, I have been recently trying to get him to do breath work because I've committed myself. I'm like, every morning I can do 5 minutes while the kids
Mhm.
are just hanging out eating breakfast. I'll do 5 minutes meditation. And he keeps walking by and looking at me in the other room. And I'm like, I know you want to do this with me. I'm going to get you to do it one day. But I'm like, at least everyone is seeing me doing it. And maybe that will spark something. So I totally
And
feel
if
you.
everything's energy, right, you do it, it changes your vibration, changes your frequency, and that affects everything around you. So I try again to let go of expectations like, oh, he's gonna, heal like me. But the better I am, the better they are, right? If my frequency is better, then they'll find their own ways and they'll feel more peaceful in the ways that work for them. And maybe it's joining, that would be amazing. But maybe it's just taking a deep breath instead of getting frustrated. Who knows?
Yeah.
Really,
Yeah.
it's just back to the self, back to this 5 minutes is going to shift my vibration and everyone around me. Everything there's an exchange always happening, always occurring,
Right. We're also interconnected. And especially when
right?
you're living under one roof together, especially the mama, I
It's
feel like we're
true.
like the hub of the wheel, like the center of the wheel of the house. It's like if mom's good, everyone else is probably doing pretty good.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's actually, we've used that analogy in my house. And so we'll say like we're each the 5 points on a wheel. And if one point is having a hard time and if my husband and I have to focus there, we've talked about that exact analogy with the kids, like you were saying before. What if I have to focus more on one and the guilt of, I'll say like, listen, this part of the wheel needs attention right now. And as compassionate and empathetic, they're usually pretty understanding of that. And then if not, then there's just more conversations and more connection to happen.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I think that's beautiful guidance for everyone listening. Where can anyone who wants to either schedule a well, first off, okay, hold on.
Yeah.
where can the listeners find you, and what are all your offerings currently? Because there's a lot. Her monthly kind of moon circle, what do you call them? Monthly ceremonies. Her monthly ceremonies are so good, and your Reiki is fantastic. And she even offers Reiki infused yoga virtually that you can tune into. So tell everyone your offerings and where they can find you, Maggie.
So everything's on my website. You can look under my services. I do private sessions, whether it's intuitive readings and guidance or private Reiki sessions, or sometimes I do a combination of the two. And then every month for the new moon, the full moon, sometimes twice a month, there are virtual and in-person ceremonies to connect ourselves to nature and what's happening astrologically, or really what's happening within ourselves. How do we kind of, I know most listeners probably feel some intensity around full moons. So how do we work with that energy as opposed to just feel that kind of chaos around us? So that's a really easy way to kind of step in and receive healing in a group environment. I run those on Zoom. And then in person here, I do yoga classes, meditation classes, also separate ceremonies at the studio that I'm at here. And then I'm also running retreats now. So there'll be more to come on that. I have a retreat in a couple of weeks here in Old Lyme, Connecticut. That's really a spiritually infused weekend of beautiful divine feminine energy all coming together. So there'll be more retreats coming up soon. And that's really a way to just like immerse yourself in the energy. I also do certifications too, like I did with you virtually.
Yeah. Yep. Highly, highly recommend. Maggie's fantastic. And you can find her on Instagram at Maggie Byrne Taylor. Yeah, and I will link it all in the show notes. So thank you so much for being here, Maggie. This was such a good conversation. Much for
having me. This was so fun.
Yeah. We'll see you next time.
So with that being said, thank you so much for listening to the Meditation Mama podcast. Your support means the world to me. So if you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, subscribe, and share with a loved one. Check out my meditations and all of my offerings at themeditationmama.com and sign up for my newsletter, and you will receive 2 free meditations. I would also love to hear from you. So send me a message on my Instagram at @the_meditationmama or an email on my website. See you next time.